Hey there. Welcome. Thanks for joining. I guess we'll see if we're having technical difficulties or not today. At the very least, I'm going to have difficulty speaking, apparently. Thanks for joining again. My name is Jeff Ferris. I'm a field product manager here at Jitterbit. A little bit of background on myself. I've been with Jitterbit for well over 7 years, coming up on 8. I started off in a professional services organization doing implementations of Jitterbit. Then I moved over to a solutions architect role, working with, pre-sales customers. And today, these days, I'm a field product manager, which means that I like to interact with our customers just to understand what their requirements are to be able to achieve their integration goals, and then be able to take that information back, bring it back into the product. Today, what I wanted to speak with everyone about is the different tools and techniques that can be used to expand your organization's connectivity between internal and external parties, and how you can determine when you need to add APIM into your ecosystem. So today, what I wanted to start off with was talking about the differences between iPaas and API management. Really, when do you even need API management? What are the benefits of having both of these into your ecosystem? And then I wanted to finish off with a demonstration, a technical demonstration. Let's take a look at the key differences between iPaas and API management. Applications are built to be communicated with using very specific protocols. And these protocols used, they vary across the myriad of all the different programs that are available. And because all these protocols are different, all these ways of communication, it's usually a barrier for connecting these different applications. Now, as I'm sure the majority of everyone here is aware, iPaas is used as a translator between the various means of communication when there are defined data sources and targets, such as between a database or an FTP site and a cloud application. Now, iPaas not only translate that data between the protocols, but it's also used to apply logic and transform data structures into the proper format so that each individual application can understand the given requests. Now, web services, on the other hand, are a way of leveling the communication barrier by using a common protocol to allow applications to be able to speak with each other. Many legacy systems do not provide web service APIs out of the box. Or if they do not provide any easily managed governance mechanisms in order to be able to protect themselves, so they can't be abused and cause significant problems. Now, with Jitterbit, you can expose your data as a web service API. The underlying data being exposed, it can come from a single application or many, which provides a means to open up your data to third parties such as customers, partners, interdepartmental, or even a way of abstracting your data flows in between various integrations. Now, along with the ability to create APIs, you're also able to provide authentication and governance, which just really means, don't ask me too much for data too often. Slow it down a little bit. So you can ask, or we're able to provide authentication and governance to both APIs created in Jitterbit, as well as we're able to proxy any existing APIs through our platform to be able to add the same level of logging, authentication, and governance, which will secure and protect your data. So when do you really need APIs or API management? This distinction can be a little bit blurred because with iPaas, you're still working with APIs and connectivity. Really, it all boils down to what your use case is. Now, for today's discussion, we're going to call the two scenarios basic integrations and complex integrations. Basic integrations is when you're trying to connect systems to specific other systems, and all the endpoints and traffic patterns are well defined. And so when I say specific other systems and that the traffic patterns are well defined, I'm saying, your ERP is always going to your CRM, for instance, and it's always going to be specific objects flowing in between these two systems. Now, in this scenario, an iPaas is typically sufficient. But what if you need to interact with a dynamic number of systems? Maybe you're not even aware of how many different systems need to consume this data or be able to provide data. Or if you need to aggregate data across multiple systems without actually storing it in all of those multiple systems. Or even just safely expose your data out so they don't crash your systems. This is when an API solution is needed. So before we get started, I want to talk about the basics of our APIM solution. Now, our APIM platform is built on three pillars. The first pillar, create, allows users to expose the operations that you're already familiar with as an API for external communication. You're also able to generate documentation for those APIs. That's where the second pillar comes into, consume, and this allows the discoverability of those created APIs by presenting that documentation out to developers. And this is all automatically generated open API documentation, also known as Swagger. Now, there are other tools such as logging and analytics, so you can have more insight into the management of your APIs. Now, lastly, there is control, which allows organizations to initialize, version, and secure their APIs. Now that we're more familiar with the basics of our APIM solution, let's take a look at the different integration scenarios. Now, with the typical basic integration, you're moving data in between two or possibly more systems. And for what it's worth, we're calling this a basic integration, but really these integrations can get pretty complex. So this is just a terminology I'm using for distinction just for today. This can be a one-way synchronization of data or a bidirectional data flow. This can handle multiple data objects, such as your accounts or contacts, and the endpoints in a basic integration are statically defined, such as Salesforce or Jira. Now, for complex integrations, we're looking at exposing data objects to a dynamic number of systems, such as an analytics tool, a data lake, possibly an external reporting tool. This may even be, one of your customers' tools, or even a way to abstract communication in between large projects to be able to allow more agile integration development. Now, this exposed data, it can come from a single object, or we can aggregate data from multiple objects, possibly multiple applications, to be able to create a single data endpoint. Now, you can also use, of course, and I'm sure many people on this call or on the conference are already doing this, of course, you can also use API management to listen to messages being sent from other applications for real-time data processing. So this would be for webhooks, or if you're a Salesforce user, an outbound message. So in short, APIs extend your integrations and accelerate your development. iPaas is the foundation of integration, and APIs allow you to quickly and easily connect the various components that are required for your business to operate, whether these processes are internal or external. With Jitterbit's low-code, no-code approach to developing these APIs, it really does free up your developers' time to work on more business-critical tasks. For what it's worth, I didn't mention this at the beginning, but before Jitterbit, I was a software engineer for 15 years. And so what I'm able to achieve in Jitterbit is a very small fraction of the time that it would have taken me to write these APIs in code, for what it's worth. And we'll get into more of that during the demonstration. Now, Jitterbit offers a single platform to be able to not only create the integrations that everyone here is already familiar with, I'm assuming, but it also allows you to turn those integrations into APIs and expose them out in a fraction, again, like I said before, in a fraction of the time that it would take a traditional developer. Now, before we get into the demonstration, I did just want to reiterate some of the components of our API management platform. So, you're able to create APIs. You're able to then automatically generate documentation for those APIs and present them out to your developers so they can then consume them quite easily. You can, as they're being consumed, we're going to generate logs, and we provide analytics to be able to help you plan out any of your APIM needs, as well as, and last but definitely not least, we're able to secure these APIs. So it's not only just authentication, we're able to dictate, who can actually access these APIs via networks, as well as how often, how fast can people be calling you, just to make sure nobody's overloading your systems. So next, I'd like to jump into the demonstration. Now, for what it's worth, I'm actually going to switch it up from what you're seeing on your screen. Today, what I'm actually going to start off with is creating an API from scratch. I'm then going to show off an API that I've pre-created where I'm combining multiple endpoints to be able to create a more robust API. Then from there, I'm going to take APIs that already exist out on the internet, they're missing some features that I need. And I'm going to proxy those through Jitterbit to be able to provide those features that I need. And then last but not least, we can walk through the various components of our API management platform. So with that, what I'm going to do is go ahead and share out my screen. So give me a second here. Okay. Now I assume that everyone is able to see my screen and they are looking at Cloud Studio. Just in case, if somebody's in the audience and they somehow have made it this entire day without seeing Cloud Studio, congratulations. I'm impressed, and thank you for making my session be the one that you viewed. So this first scenario that I'm going to demonstrate, the backstory to this is that let's say my organization has a legacy ERP. We invested a lot of money in creating this ERP and getting it dialed in. Our staff are very well versed in it. However, it's just missing some features. I need to expose this data out to an internal web application to be able to display various accounts and contacts. So in this scenario, often businesses have future. You can either replace your ERP, which the organization doesn't want to do. We already invested in it, and it's working 90%, has 90% of the features that I need. Or you can modernize it. And so, of course, you can always do custom development, but that's slow and is even more expensive. So with Jitterbit, what I'm going to do today is show you how quickly I'm able to take data in a legacy database and expose it out as an API. So before I get started, the database that we're working with today is Postgres. And there will be two tables that I'm working with. So I have an accounts table with data in it, and I have a contacts table with data in it. And these two tables are related to each other. So for every one account, there could be 0 or more contacts. And so I'm going to take this and expose it out as an API. Now, before I get started, I do just want to point out, if you take a look at the list of names here, you can see there's a lot of repeating data. And that's because of the one-to-many relationship that we have. You get a bunch of repeating data when you look at it in just a standard database. Anybody who's familiar with databases is very familiar with what I'm talking about here. So that is something that we clean up in Jitterbit. We make it very easy. So today, I need to retrieve that data to be able to present it as an API. So I'm going to query that data from my database. I'm going to go ahead and give it a name. We'll call it accounts and contacts. And I'm going to reuse this label a lot. So I'm just going to copy that and we'll call the operation get accounts and contacts. Now I do need to configure this so it knows what data to retrieve from my database. And by the way, in case it wasn't already obvious, I pre-configured the connection to the database because it's absolutely entirely boring to watch me fill that out. So I'm going to grab all of my tables. And for what it's worth, if I needed to, I could pre-filter these tables. It's just like Design Studio, so you don't have to download all of your tables if you have a database with a lot of data in it. I'm going to go ahead and grab my accounts table and my contacts table, and it's going to ask, who's the parent, who's the child. So in this case, again, for every one account, it's 0 or more contacts, which means my accounts is my parent. I need to tell Jitterbit, how do these two tables relate? Again, if you're familiar with a database, this is I'm configuring a join statement. So in this specific table, my accounts ID relates to my contacts account ID. So I'll go ahead and link those together and finish it up. Next, I need to specify how do these join together? What does this data structure look like? There's a lot of different ways that database tables are related to each other. So just to keep beating that dead horse, again, it's a 0 or more relationship, also known as a left join or an outer join, and really depending on what database syntax you're used to. Now that I have this configured, I'll go ahead and click Next. It's going to ask me what kind of fields do I want to select. I'm going to go ahead and select everything just because it's easier that way. I could put in filtering statements in here, also known as a where statement. I don't need that for today, so I'm going to just go ahead and click Next. It gives me a little preview of what my data structure will look like, and I'll finish it up here. So now that I've pulled data out of my database, or I'm set up to pull data out of my database, next, let's go ahead and create the API portion. So I need to specify what is that JSON going to look like. So in this case, this data is going into an API response. And again, I'm going to use that accounts and contacts. I need to configure this as well. So in this case, again, I uploaded a file. This isn't very fun to watch, so I've gone ahead and done this for us. But you can preview this data, what it's going to look like, and it matches the same structure as the database. So for every one account, we have an array of cases, also meaning that I could have 0 or more. So I'll go ahead and click Next and finish up here. So now I need to be able to transform this data. Again, if you're familiar with Design Studio only, it's a very familiar concept. It's just a little bit different way of doing it, where you just need to be able to configure your sources and targets, and then you can create your transformation to go in between. So I'm going to, again, give this the same name. And also, again, if you're familiar with Design Studio, this should be a familiar concept with a new look. So this is our transformation window where you have your source data structure on the left, you have your target data structure on your right, and you're able to just drag and drop in between these two locations. And you know what? I believe I grabbed the wrong schema, so let me go ahead and clear this schema out. I guess it's not a demo unless you have an issue. So give me 1 second while I clean this up. You know what? I'm just going to remove this and start again, because that's just the easier way of doing it. Interesting. Interesting. I'm going to have to try this differently, I guess. For some reason, it is picking up a different schema than what I had before, what I had entered in. Oh, I see. That would explain why. So instead, I need to use this schema. I apologize, everyone. Demo jitters. So now that we have our new correct data structure, we actually map this together. So I'm going to go ahead and map again. You can just drag and drop these. You're also able to auto map any of your data structures. So again, this should be very familiar with anybody who's been working with this, including Design Studio. So now that everything is mapped up, I'm going to go ahead and return back to my workflow. I'm going to give this a name just because it's easier for me to redo. I'll go ahead and deploy this. And next, I need to turn this into an API. So if we hop into our API manager, you'll see a list of our APIs that I've already created just in my environment. Today, what I'm going to do is create a brand new API. So I'm going to click on that. I'll just give this the name, just accounts and contacts generically. I do need to select what environment this is going to execute in, just because this is creating a URL to be able to trigger an operation in Jitterbit. And so you need to specify the environment, the project, the operation, etc. Now, right here, this service route, I just want to point out, this is the naming that you'll see in your URL. This is automatically generated from what I put in as my label. However, I don't need to use that. I can absolutely use whatever I wish. I'm also able to add versioning into my API, so that way if I make any changes in the future, I'm able to have a completely separate version at the exact same time, and then inform developers so they have time to move over to the new version before I completely deprecate the original. There are other options that you would find with any HTTP, timeout, security, basic security items here. I'm going to go ahead and click Next. I need to be able to select my project. Next, I need to select which operation I'm going to use. So in this case, it's going to be get accounts and contacts. The HTTP method, for those who aren't familiar with web services, this is just a way of delineating operations on a URL. So one URL, you can send data to it, you can get data from it, and a myriad of other choices. So in this case, I'm just getting data. But for those who are very familiar with APIs, you're able to create any HTTP verb that you wish. And this is going to allow you to have a single URL with multiple operations behind it. So you're not limited to just one action per URL. You can make a fully robust API endpoint. Today, all I need is get, and it's going to ask me where I'm getting this data from. Again, we can get super sophisticated here. We can use system variables where the data output can come from multiple different paths. Today, I'm just using a final target, but for what it's worth, if you have an API, let's say you're just listening in for webhooks, then the webhook doesn't require any kind of response. That's where no response comes into play. I'm going to go ahead and add this. Now, if I had other operations, I would continue to keep adding this, and the delineation would be based off of the HTTP method. I'll go ahead and click next. It's going to ask me for some security items, which today for this specific API, I don't need. We'll go into security later on in the demonstration. So I'll just click next here. It's going to give me a little summary of, well, this is what I'm about to do. Are you sure you want to do it? And I am. So I'll go ahead and publish this out and copy my URL. So next I want to test this out. I want to see what it looks like. So I'm going to use an application called Postman. For those who aren't aware, this is just an industry standard tool. This is not Jitterbit's tool. I have had to explain that before, so I like to be clear about this. So I'm going to go ahead and paste in that URL that I just was given and click send. And now you can see here's the same data that's in my database exposed as a JSON object. And you can see that it doesn't have a whole ton of repeating data. So I didn't even have to do anything programmatically to say, hey, you know, if you see this twice, don't show it. Jitterbit handled all that for me. So if we hop back over to the database, you know, just to reiterate, you know, this database sends it all out in a flattened, very repeating structure where we're able to make this nice, pretty formatted structure. Now, before we jump into the next demonstration, I just wanted to point out a couple of the components of, you know, just to be able to provide the different options for your APIs, for those of you who are very familiar with web application development, where we have the final name of the endpoint as, you know, the last structure in the path. But then we also delineate using version, using the environment. And so this allows you to have the exact same endpoint across multiple environments. So you can have a dev, a test, a prod. You're able to have different versions of the exact same endpoint. And then obviously you can have many various endpoints. So it's a really flexible tool. You can do quite a lot with it. So jumping back over into the product, let's take a look at the next scenario that I wanted to discuss. So I'm going to get prepared. I'm going to jump back into Cloud Studio. But you know, this next scenario, what the backstory is you know, it's a really common scenario for organizations to have one tool for their help desk to use to be able to interface with customers. Possibly they even have this information where the customers don't even speak to a help desk person. They can just see this information live. And then, you know, once these new issues come in, they get copied over to an internal tool for developers and support staff to be able to enter their own comments, which may or may not be the kind of information that you want your customers to view. So in this situation, you know, you'd be taking data from, let's say, of course, Salesforce logged me out. Let me try this again. So let's say we're using Salesforce Service Cloud as our ticketing system for our customer-facing interactions. However, once that ticket's entered in, we automatically want to take that information and send it back out to Jira. Gosh, I've never seen this before. I guess I'm glad I'm not trying to intentionally show off Salesforce. So this might be a little interesting on my API. I'm not be able to show off what's going on in Salesforce, but I guess we'll see. It looks like Salesforce is down, so this is fun. I'm going to show you off Jira. Just assume that my cases in Salesforce don't have any comments in them. Whereas if I go into Jira, you can see I do have comments. So I can see what was brought in from Salesforce, so I can see the subject, I can see a description. I can even see my Salesforce external ID because any of you who are aware or familiar with integration, that's how you link your two systems together. But then I also have comments in here, which, again, these aren't necessarily customer-facing comments. And so I wouldn't want to actually make this data go back into Salesforce just because it could be problematic for me as an organization. So in Jitterbit, what I'm able to do is take these two systems. I'll query out Salesforce. I'll get my accounts. I will get my cases, and then from there, I'll get any of my case comments from Jira. I'm able to then take that and combine it back into Jitterbit. Back into a single data target, and then be able to present that out to the users. So what I'm going to show you, or attempt to show you next, is what that looks like as a data target. Now, Salesforce is scaring me right now because it's not letting me log into the web page. But maybe if I'm lucky, their APIs are still working. I guess we'll find out together. So if I come back into my APIs, I've already created this as an API. I need to go grab my URL. So now that we're back at the list of APIs, we'll grab this link, come back into Postman, and I'll go ahead and execute this. Again, Salesforce is acting funny on me. Oh, looks like it's working on the API. Oh, that's good. So you can see here, I have a structure with my Salesforce account. If anybody here is familiar with Salesforce, this is a Salesforce ID. I can grab any of my account name information and phone number. Again, this often isn't information that I would normally store in Jira. This is useful to have in a single location. So that way I don't have to worry about my customers seeing comments that may not be what I want to show them, but I'm able to still view all of this together in a single view for internal purposes. Now that you've seen, creating an API with a single data source or an API using multiple data sources combined, let's take a look at what happens if you have existing APIs that you need to proxy through Jitterbit. So I do have a list of APIs here. These are just out on the internet, just example APIs that I found. I'm going to go ahead and copy this link. We will go ahead and come back into Postman, and I just want to show you I have nothing on my slate. So this is what the API looks like, just from the data that we get. There's nothing wrong with this API, but if this was an internal API, let's say that this API was developed very rapidly. It was kind of a proof of concept that then turned into a production API. A lot of departments started using it, even though it really wasn't ready. And so there's not really great logging with it. I don't know how often that this is being called. I can certainly be called way too many times too fast and bring down the back-end data storage. And there's no way to authenticate. So it's just really not an ideal situation. So with Jitterbit, what we're able to do is take these APIs and proxy them through Jitterbit, be able to get the same benefits that you would from an API that was created directly in Jitterbit. So I'm going to go ahead and create a brand new proxy. We'll call this demo proxy. You can use versioning here. For this purpose, I'm not going to. I am going to select an environment. Again, this is going to be part of your URL that is modifiable if you need, and you don't have to do it right now. You can always go back if you're like, hey, I don't really like that. Not a problem. I do always increase my timeout just because I like to. Next, I need to be able to provide a URL, and this is more of a base URL. This is not going to be the total URL. So in this case, I'm going to cut off the end, just because all of the APIs start with this portion of the URL. Now, the cool thing about this is if this API had come with a Swagger document, I could just upload this and I don't have to enter in any URLs. I don't have to do anything like that. The Open API document will just automatically define all of that stuff for me. Unfortunately, this API doesn't have that, so I'm going to create this manually. I'll go ahead and create next. Now, I need to enter in a human readable label, just that way it's easier to manage, but then be able to provide what's going to be added on to the end of that base URL that I gave it. So in this case, it's going to be employees. Now, for this specific method, it's a HTTP GET, so I'll go ahead and add this. And while I'm in here, I'm going to go ahead and add another one in there. So create employee. Again, this is going to be just the end of the URL. I'll go ahead and add that in there. And this particular API is going to be a post. I will go ahead and select that as well and add that. Go ahead and click next. Again, I can select security profiles. In this case, I actually am going to provide authentication for this, so I'll go ahead and assign this. While we're in here, you can also add headers and values. If you need to, you can also add it so it always overrides. This is just more for logging analytics, or if there's a header that you just want to make sure always gets proxied out to your API. I'll go ahead and click next. Again, it gives me a summary. I will publish this out. It gives me a list of the URLs that I just created. I'm going to go ahead and copy this URL, come back out to Postman, and I'll enter it in. Now, one thing I want to note about this original one is that I'm not providing any authorization on this API. And same thing right now. Right now, I don't have any authorization. So if I try to access this, it's going to say, hey, you're not authorized to access this. So let's add in some authentication. In this case, I selected basic authentication. For those who want to know, my username is Jitterbit. My password is 123. Feel free to have fun with that later. We'll go ahead and click next, and you can see that I have the exact same data provided, except now not only is it authenticated, but there's a few other benefits that go along with it. So let me take you there, and we can take a look at what those benefits are. So the first step where I want to take us is our portal manager, and this allows us to automatically generate Open API documentation for any of the APIs that we've created. Now you can see the documentation is already created for the API that I pre-created for this demo, and you can preview what it's going to look like. This is a familiar scene to anybody who's familiar with API development. This is just your standard Swagger document. Now I'm able to regenerate this documentation, and then it will automatically go out and find any of the APIs that I've added and be able to provide Swagger documentation for them. Now this gives a good framework, but if you wanted to add any more color to it, you wanted to add any more descriptions, you're able to edit that over here in the YAML to be able to then export that out to your developers, which once this is published, you're able to send developers out to our API portal, where again, they're going to see a list of any of the Swagger documentation, which should be a very familiar way of looking how this documentation works. For what it's worth, you're also able to test out your APIs through here as well. I just didn't because I prefer using Postman personally. So if we come back into our API manager, the other thing about that API is that I can't see, any kind of information about when that's being hit, what kind of information is being sent to them, or where anything's even coming from. So with this specific API, you can see that demo proxy employees API, we're providing quite a bit of information in our logs, which we then take and we will run analytics off of it. And so this gives you basic information like how often things are being hit every day, how fast are you responding with these requests, what kind of status codes are you giving. Then beyond that, you're able to see, so who's consuming my APIs the most, and really what is the most popular API to be able to be consumed. This is really useful information for all of your API planning. So last but not least, let's take a quick look at the security profiles. So with Jitterbit, we support, well, you can see them somewhat here, but let's go into a new profile. You're able to, we support anonymous authentication, meaning no username and password, which somebody I'm sure is asking, why would you call that a security profile, no username and password? And the answer is because with any of our security profiles, you're also able to add whitelisting in here, as well as rate limiting. So basically saying you can only call this API so frequently per minute before you get cut off, and you have to just wait until the end of the minute. We also support HTTP basic, which is just a username and password, OAuth 2, and for those who are more technical, we do support both two-legged and three-legged OAuth 2. And for those who aren't technical or don't know what I just said, just for your information, the difference between the two, a two-legged is more computer-to-computer interactions, whereas three-legged is human-to-computer interactions. So a three-legged would be, if you've ever logged in with your Google credentials, that's a three-legged OAuth authentication. So the point of all of this is that our APIs can be used for both, application-to-application communication, but you can also embed APIs into your websites or into your web applications, be able to use the exact same authentication that your application uses, and then have just a seamless user experience without having to worry about, did I secure my authentication for this API deeply enough into my web application? It's just going to use standard OAuth 2, and that's what it's for. Last but not least, it's going to also be, we support API keys, which is just a key value pair that you can use for authentication. With all of that, that concludes the technical portion of this demonstration. I did just want to, reiterate, we looked at the the difference between API management and iPaas. We talked about when you really need an API management solution. What are the benefits of combining both? And then I was able to show you, creating an API from scratch on a single data source. Show you what it looks like creating an API to be able to combine multiple data sources into a single proxy my existing APIs through Jitterbit, for just that way you can manage all your APIs in a single location. And then all the benefits that we add to be able to help users consume API and protect your systems from being consumed possibly in the wrong way. So next, I think we're going to have a Q&A session, and I'd like to thank everybody for their time, and I look forward to hearing any questions that come about.
Can you hear me okay, Jeff?
I can now, yes.
Okay, good. Sorry about that. I struggled with the mute button there for a second. First of all, for anybody who I haven't met yet on the call, my name is Dan Moore. I'm the Senior Vice President of Customer Success here at Jitterbit, and along with all of our customer success managers, support engineers, documentation, and training team members, my sole focus is helping you achieve maximum value from the use of Jitterbit. Thank you, Jeff, Outstanding, critical topic since you and I started working together here at Jitterbit over 5 years ago now. APIs and the central role that APIs play in digital transformation and how to do that and how to do it right. We actually have a couple of questions here, and Jeff, I'd like to direct these to you if I can. So first one, any rule of thumb on using rate limiting? Any thoughts for our team on that?
I would recommend no matter what, rate limiting, no matter what. By default, our API gateway does do rate limiting for you. This is really all going to depend on, what kind of data queries are going to be being pulled out of your backend system. How hard can the system be hit? Really just what kind of a CPU load are you getting out of a single call? You're able to take that and be able to gauge, okay, so how fast can I have data be hitting this thing before it starts causing degradation or worse, an outage? And so I would validate what kind of a load a single API call would make to be able to judge, okay, well, how often can this be called? Yeah.
Got it. Outstanding. Okay, so thanks for that feedback, Jeff. Another question is, can we use the Open API documentation to generate a connector to our API proxies for citizen integrators? Or how would we approach that?
I'm not 100% 100% clear on the question. It is so. There's a couple ways that this can be asked, I guess. So if you're asking, can we take the Swagger documentation that we generate from our APIs to then be able to create a custom connector and connector builder? I would say not yet. However, I guess I will say that is something that we are looking into adamantly. So that is going to be a possibility in the future.
Got it. Okay, thanks for that. So let me hit another one here. What are so in your travels, Jeff, and by way, I think, Jeff, you mentioned earlier that you were with the professional services organization for a long time. What are some interesting ways that companies are using APIs?
So one of my favorites. What's that?
Yeah, go ahead. You go.
Oh, okay. So one of my favorites was a customer or is a customer that they had a legacy application that they were using for their inventory and also their accounting for all of their companies. This organization had various franchises, and these franchisees needed to be able to extract inventory availability and be able to see their past purchase history. So this application that they were using to do this, again, it just didn't have APIs created on them. And not only that, if they did create APIs on them, they wouldn't be safe to put out on the internet. And these vendors, these franchisees, they're out in the middle of nowhere, so they have to go over the internet for all this. They're not on the same network. And so they're able to expose out their legacy system using our APIs without having to completely retool or get a brand new application or have the expense and of creating a custom API and then have to retain staff to be able to then maintain and extend that application. So they're able to, rather than having to use their crucial, precious developers' time, who are using, they're building revenue generating tools. They could just use a single person who just wasn't, as technically advanced as a software engineer to do it.
Got it. No, it makes a lot of sense. One last question. We get this question sometimes, and it's on what resources or best practices does Jitterbit have on APIs? Well, I think we both know the question. I'll hand it over to you.
So, in that context, usually what I'd recommend is visiting our success site. So there's lots of documentation on the best practices out there, as well as in our university. There are plenty of training courses on APIs to not only help you get started, but to be able to learn these best practices.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll echo that. We've got an extensive set of documentation. If you just go out to Google and Google, Jitterbit best practices, it'll take you back to links on Success Central. It'll hit a broad set of topics. In addition to our training, we have a lot of recorded videos that focus on these topics as well. And as we've said on several prior I think breakout sessions today, we are happy to connect you with one of our customer success architects, and they'll go into the topics that we were ever able to hit relatively briefly on this call in much greater depth and in a manner that's specific to what you're trying to achieve. Well, thanks very much, Jeff. I mean, it was a fantastic session. I trust educational for everyone who attended. I would ask all of our team members, this is actually the last session of the day. I think the Success Lounge is maybe open for a little bit more, but if anyone wants to go there and speak to a Jitterbit Success Architect, they should be present. It is time for the announcement of our Apple AirPods Pro winner today, and that winner is Rodney Hall. So Rodney, congratulations. We'll be contacting you after the event to make arrangement to ship those Apple AirPods Pro to you. I'd like to, for the final time today, take time to thank everyone who's participated in Jitterbit Integrate, and especially our users, our partners, our customers for your attendance in this session. We appreciate your support, your partnership, and your feedback. And as always, we remain committed to your success and to providing you with a great customer experience going forward. Thank you, everyone, for attending Jitterbit Integrate. Please visit our lounges and play our trivia game before you leave today and collect points and cool prizes. And we will see you all very soon. Thank you again.